Imagine the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, the successor of St. Peter, abandoning the tomb of the apostles and the heart of the Christian world. It sounds unthinkable, a betrayal of the very identity of the papacy. And yet, it happened. For nearly 70 years, from 1309 to 1376, 7 successive popes, all of them French, did not live in Rome. Instead, they reigned from a magnificent, fortress-like palace in the provincial town of Avignon in southern France. This scandalous period, marked by French political domination, lavish spending, and administrative corruption, became known to its critics as the Babylonian captivity of the Church, a dark chapter when the papacy seemed to be a mere puppet of the French monarchy. How did this unprecedented situation come to be? The story begins with a violent clash of wills between 2 powerful men, Pope Boniface VIII and King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. At the turn of the 14th century, Philip was consolidating the power of the French crown, and he needed money to fund his wars. He began to tax the clergy in France, a right that had historically belonged to the papacy. Boniface VIII, a proud and brilliant but undiplomatic pontiff, furiously resisted. The conflict escalated, with Boniface issuing the famous papal bull Unam Sanctam, the most extreme declaration of papal supremacy in history. Philip's response was brutal. He put the Pope on trial in absentia for heresy and sent his agents to Italy. In 1303, they stormed the papal residence in Avignon, captured the elderly Pope, and roughed him up. The feeling of humiliation was profound. The local townspeople freed Boniface after a few days, but he died a month later, a broken man. The throne of St. Peter was now dangerously vulnerable to the power of the French king. After the brief pontificate of Boniface's successor, the cardinals elected a Frenchman, Clement V, in 1305. Clement was a weak and sickly man, completely dominated by the ruthless King Philip. Philip pressured him to move the papal court out of the chaos and political turmoil of Rome, arguing that it would be safer in France. In 1309, Clement V took the fateful step of moving the entire papal administration, the Curia, to Avignon. While Avignon was technically part of the Papal States at the time, it was located right on the border of the French kingdom, and for all practical purposes, the popes were under the thumb of the French king. And so began the Avignon Papacy. What was intended as a temporary move became a semi-permanent state of affairs. The popes who followed Clement were all French, and they found the peaceful security and comfort of Avignon far preferable to the factional violence and political instability of Rome. A massive and opulent palace was built, the Palais des Papes, which still stands today. The papal court became known for its luxurious lifestyle and a highly centralized and often corrupt bureaucracy. The sound of coins clinking filled the papal treasury as new and creative taxes were levied on churches across Europe to fund this lavish court. To many outside of France, the situation was a scandal. The Pope was the Bishop of Rome, the successor to Peter, who was martyred in Rome. For him to live anywhere else seemed a profound betrayal. Great saints and poets of the era like Petrarch and St. Catherine of Siena decried the situation. They saw Avignon as a symbol of the Church's worldliness and corruption, a new Babylon where the bride of Christ was held captive by temporal powers. St. Catherine of Siena, in particular, was a relentless voice calling for the Pope to return to Rome. This uneducated but spiritually powerful woman traveled to Avignon and, with brutal honesty, confronted Pope Gregory XI. Imagine the scene. A simple Dominican tertiary, dressed in humble robes, speaking with fiery conviction to the most powerful man in Christendom in his own opulent palace. She told him that his place was in Rome, at the tomb of the martyrs, and that his failure to return was an offense to God. Her words, combined with the worsening political situation in Italy and a growing desire to reform the church, finally had their effect. Despite the intense pressure from the French king and his own French cardinals, Pope Gregory XI made the courageous decision to return. In 1376, he left Avignon and, in early 1377, he made his solemn entry into Rome. The 67-year Babylonian captivity was over. The fallout from the Avignon period was immense and devastating. The prestige of the papacy was severely damaged. Its reputation for impartiality was shattered, as it was seen largely as a French institution. The massive financial apparatus built in Avignon created resentment across Europe and was a major contributing factor to the later calls for reform that would fuel the Protestant Reformation. Even more disastrously, Gregory XI's return to Rome did not bring the peace he had hoped for. He died shortly after his arrival. The subsequent papal election was held under the intense pressure of a Roman mob demanding an Italian pope. They got one, Urban VI. But the French cardinals, who had hated leaving Avignon, claimed the election was invalid due to duress. They fled Rome, elected their own pope, a Frenchman, of course, who took the name Clement VII, and returned to Avignon. The result was the Great Western Schism, a 40-year nightmare where two, and eventually three, different men all claimed to be the one true pope, excommunicating each other and plunging Christendom into chaos. The Avignon Papacy, born of political weakness, ultimately led to the greatest constitutional crisis in the history of the Church, a wound that would take decades to heal. If you are fascinated by the dramatic political intrigues and power struggles within church history, consider following our channel.